This clip is brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com.
Hey, this is Kurt Angle, and welcome to the Kurt Angle Show. On today's episode, we'll be doing a watch-along to my Iron Man match against Shawn Michaels in 2005, one of the greatest programs I've ever been involved in. But first, I want to introduce to you my co-host, Conrad Thompson. How you doing today, Conrad?
Man, I'm excited to be here, but I think you've undersold it. This isn't just one of the best programs you were involved in. It's one of the best programs of all time. When people talk about their Mount Rushmore of wrestlers, their favorite wrestlers of all time, yourself and Shawn Michaels are on more of those than you'd imagine. And it's crazy to think you only wrestled 3 times. You would have assumed two greats like that, man, they're going to wrestle 100 times. That's not the case. But we thought, what better way to break down and maybe a follow-up effort, if you will, from WrestleMania 21, which was one of our first episodes, actually, than to watch the Iron Man match here from October 3rd, 2005, that happened on Monday Night Raw. You know, it's crazy for me to think about in hindsight. There were only 3 matches. Where does Shawn rank in terms of your favorite opponent all time? Is he number 1?
You know what? Overall, with everything, like I'm talking Shawn Michaels across the board, charisma, chops, in-ring ability, athleticism, look, he had it all more than anybody else. The only one that was actually better than him in the ring was Chris Benoit.
Well, it's interesting that we only saw it a handful of times, because it does feel like if you've got these two, arguably the greatest wrestler alive, like if people in that era said, well, I think Shawn Michaels is, and other people said, well, I think Kurt Angle is, I don't think those guys could even argue that. So, well, I'll give you that. But it didn't happen very often, just the 3 times. That's always been fascinating to me. So I'm glad we're going to watch another one here. I know we did the WrestleMania 21 match, which people still talk about, but this Iron Man match doesn't feel like it gets talked about as often as, say, a WrestleMania or a SummerSlam. So I'm glad we get to highlight it. But I want to highlight an interesting interview quote that you gave the Peoria Journal. This line in particular stood out. I've wrestled everybody on SmackDown more than once. I love wrestling the Eddie Guerreros and Rey Mysterios and guys like that. But there are guys on Raw that I haven't wrestled in years or have never wrestled. I would like to make a move and have a chance to be on the franchise, on Raw. Now, just to remind everybody, we're still in the early days of the brand split, and they're trying to really stick to it. So it was a big deal that you got to sort of cross streams, if you will, with Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania. But for you to give that sort of interview to a newspaper and it not be on TV or the WWE magazine, that feels like that's not Kurt Angle in a scripted promo. That's just the way the real life Kurt Angle thinks, not the character, but the real life Kurt Angle. Am I off base, or is that right? That's really what you felt at the time.
No, you're right. I did want to make a move to Raw. I was on SmackDown for 4 years. I wrestled everybody over there. I didn't get tired of it. I love wrestling those guys. I mean, we had the SmackDown 6 that was a really special group of guys. And, a lot of people, especially The Office, considered SmackDown the B show and Raw was the A show. I didn't consider that. I actually felt that SmackDown was a little bit better than Raw. I thought we were having better wrestling on our show, not as much involvement with storylines as Raw, but we were a much better wrestling show. But I didn't wrestle Shawn Michaels ever. He was the guy that I had my eye on that I wanted to go over to Raw. And I also Batista and, other guys that, I never got a chance to work with before. And guys like Triple H that I didn't work for 4 years. So I wanted to change. Yes.
Are you able to express that backstage, or did you think, hey, maybe the best way to communicate that is I'll just mention it in some media appearances and maybe I can sort of speak it into existence?
No, I had to talk with Vince, and I told him I had my eyes set on Shawn Michaels, and I wanted to move over to Raw. I knew that Shawn wasn't going to move to SmackDown. There are guys that just didn't want to move over to SmackDown for whatever reason, whether they thought it was the B show or it wasn't as important as Raw. I didn't believe that, but some guys did. And so I knew that Shawn wasn't going to move over to SmackDown. I knew that I'd have to move over to Raw.
Did you think maybe Shawn or other guys, maybe not just Shawn, didn't want to be on SmackDown because of the schedule. Because back then, I think most SmackDowns were taped on a Tuesday. So if you did a house show loop, you would perhaps miss a little more time at home, a little more time with the family. Or did they feel like, hey, it's the B show. It's not on as big of a station as Raw. It's not live. Did they just miss the rush of being on live TV? What do you think it was that made people say, I'd rather be on Raw than SmackDown?
Well, I just think that from a talent standpoint, SmackDown never caught up to Raw at that particular time. It was a newer show, not that new. I mean, I think it ran on for a good 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
But it was the newer show, and Raw had such a great tradition. I just believe that they thought that Raw was always going to be the A show and that SmackDown was going to be the B show. It was that simple.
So between then and the Shawn Michaels Iron Man match, you work a program with Eugene over your gold medals at SummerSlam, which is probably not exactly a highlight of your career. And then you get John Cena and Unforgiven, which I know we'll cover at some point. But did you know the point was always to get you back with Shawn? Did you know this was going to be a trilogy? We're going to have to pay this thing off.
I didn't know. Nobody told me, but I realized that, being with 1-to-1, that's not usually how programs end.
Right.
So I knew eventually down the line we would have another match. I just didn't know when. And I started a program with Eugene, and we continued on with that. And then I went into John Cena for the next pay-per-view. And by then, that's when I was told I was going to work with Shawn with the rubber match.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.